Yes. Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Not bad. How about yourself?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. It's been a while. I feel like this has been months in the making.
Yeah, my apologies for that.
It's all right. It's all right. I'm just glad to have you on the show. So first and foremost, thanks for everyone. You guys are listening to Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Everywhere on Apple, Spotify, all that good stuff. We're also on 98.3 KMWV, Salem's local community radio station. So I just want to get into it. Who are you, and tell me about yourself. I want to hear your story, man. Like what you're all about. I'm very fascinated.
Well, thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to be a guest on your show. I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. So I was born and raised in Chicago. I am the oldest of three boys. You cannot tell this from looking at me or my voice, but I'm 6'8" tall, and I played college basketball in Charleston, South Carolina at the Citadel, despite having 3 knee surgeries in high school. When I graduated from college, I moved home to find a job. I'm going to really date myself now. This was long before the internet was available. And I was all set to make my mark on the world with my newly obtained business administration degree. Fortunately, I was able to find that first job in the corporate headquarters of Wendy's International, the hamburger chain. Unfortunately, I ended up living with my parents for the next 3.5 years as I helped my mom care for my father and my grandmother, who were both dying of different forms of cancer. Okay. In my professional career, as I mentioned, I was in marketing at Wendy's. I was also a hospital administrator. Then I kind of did a big pivot and became a police officer. And part of that was I was an undercover narcotics investigator, and I was a SWAT team hostage negotiator.
You know, that's a big 180, right? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah,
that
huge.
Is a huge 180.
And there's a reason behind that, which we can get into.
Yeah, let's do it.
So I was also a school security consultant. I coached girls high school basketball in Texas, been a motivational speaker. Last year became an author, but for the last 9 years, I've been dealing with this rare form of cancer. And then finally, my wife and I have been married for 28 years. We have one child, a daughter, who's a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and is a lieutenant. Yeah, a lieutenant in the new branch of the military, the Space Force.
Woo! That is more than podcast over. Thank you. Thank you.
Pick a rabbit hole. Which one you want to go down?
Well, I'm very fascinated with Wendy's. What made you get into Wendy's? And I that's just so. What years was that? And what was that whole process like, especially being on the marketing side of it?
Yeah, that was 1982 to about 1985.
Were you the Where's the Beef era?
I was.
Was that you guys?
Claire Peller, yeah. Where's the beef? You know, this old 85-year-old former beautician, beauty operator from Chicago, who, all of a sudden became a household name with going around saying, "Where's the beef?" And, I don't know how much money she made out of that, but it was just so much. I mean, she was about 2'2". I mean, just a tiny little lady, but just a lot of fun and a lot of spunk and, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was a lot of fun being at Wendy's. It was kind of the heyday of fast food at that time.
Was that your team who did that, or was that just like everyone as a collective, or how does that work, especially being in marketing? Because that was such a big thing. And you're right, fast food really took off, I feel like, in the 80s and then, into the 90s. I was born in 91, but I saw the later half of, I grew up just with fast food in my life because of television. I always tell people my first babysitter was MTV,
Right.
And a lot of the commercials were very attracted to me. I loved every single one of them.
Yeah, it was marketing was kind of divided up into different sections. There was advertising, which was kind of what you saw on television and we were at the time probably a Fortune 50 company. We had a national advertising agency out of New York that would put together different, here's what we're thinking for this, here's what we're thinking for that. And then the different regions around the country had their own kind of local advertising agencies, which would do, point of purchase stuff and sponsor, ball games or days at the zoo or things like that. And so, there was advertising, there was marketing, which did a lot of the crunching the numbers. And then eventually I got into, there was field marketing, which encompassed different areas around the country. And then there was new product marketing. And I eventually got into new product marketing at the end of my career at Wendy's. And that was all different. I mean, we were looking at putting hot dogs in stores. We were looking at putting breakfast in stores, which they now have coincidentally, you know, and things like that. So it was just a great time. It was all kinds of stuff going on, and you had a lot of fun, and it was just a great learning experience for me.
Out of your whole career on that avenue, what was one of your biggest wins through that time period? Do you have a specific moment that you think about, like, this was the win from just this period of my life?
Well, it was interesting because hot dogs was one of the things I was heavily involved in, and you know, we would. You've got to understand that even if we put a new product in a region, say Indianapolis, the stores in Indianapolis, Indiana, it was hundreds of thousands of dollars, because it was, you know, even if it was just a strip for the menu board, you know, with the hot dog, you had to reprogram the registers, you know, so we collected all the data. It was putting new equipment in the stores. It was getting suppliers to supply the hot dogs and the buns and all that kind of stuff. It was training the staff. It cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. And then when we would put it in, I would go out to say Indianapolis, and they didn't know who I was. And I would just go around to as many stores as I could, you know, over a day or two. And were they suggestively selling the product? Sometimes I would take the product, box it up, go to the post office, and send it back to the operations people so that they, you know, is this the way it's supposed to look? I mean, obviously, you know, they make allowances for a couple of days in the post office, you know, in the mail and that kind of stuff. But we did all kinds of stuff like that, and spent, you know, like I said, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and maybe then decide, no, we're not going to do this. Because for every product you put in the store, you would cannibalize another product. So if I came in and ordered a hot dog, that means I wasn't ordering a single or a double or a triple or a chicken sandwich or a salad or a baked potato or something like that. So you had to realize that when you put something new in, you were going to lose it somewhere else within, you know, the menu board.
And I guess I never thought about it like that, because I always wonder why most, especially like when you look at like the other, like the McDonald's and the other, like they're very notorious for having different foods in different regions. And I'm sure Wendy's is the same. Because there's Wendy's in other countries, right?
Oh yeah, Wendy's is international. Yeah.
So is there any funky products and the only thing I can think of is McDonald's, and they have like the spaghetti, they had the pizza like in Italy, and then the spaghetti, and then they had in Germany they have other, you know, brat options. You know what I'm saying? Like, was there any weird, funky international things like that, or was that nothing, just standard to the point?
For us it was just standard, and you know, when you know that was the kind of the heyday of fast food. And then, you know, fast food kind of fell off, and it was, you know, it was bad for you, had too much salt, had too much fat, had things like that. And so everybody kind of retrenched and said, you know, all right, we're going back to the basics. You know, what got us here? You know, hamburgers, fries, and drinks, and that's all we're going to do. And then, you know, over time, you know, things were like, well, maybe it's not as bad. So, we're going to add this, and we're going to add kids' meals. You know, and kids' meals were as much for, you know, and this is going to sound sexist, but in a lot of ways women, because women didn't want to order, you know, basically a quarter-pound hamburger. They wanted something smaller. So kids' meals was for kids, but it was also for people who didn't want a bigger burger, and we needed to, you know, to recognize that and have something for them as well.
How old were you when you finally, like, on your last year of that position? How, like, what ages were you from?
So I was there from I was 21 when I graduated from college. So, and I got the job. I graduated in May, got the job in October, and probably till I was maybe 25, 26, something like that.
25. Wow. That's a good amount of time, especially, and you're like, your prime was dedicated to Wendy's. So and your last year, maybe it was a lot sooner. When was that moment that you realized that you remember, this isn't going to be me for the rest of my life, I want something else? Because then you transitioned into, you know, law enforcement. Like, how does that happen?
Well, I ended up actually from Wendy's, I went to hospital administration. I went to work for Wendy's is located just outside of Columbus, Ohio, in a suburb called Dublin. And I was, you know, at the time I was doing new product marketing. and this large hospital in Columbus called Riverside, it was like, 1,100 beds, about 5,000 employees, was putting in a new program development process. So it made a lot of sense for me to kind of come over from Wendy's and do that at the hospital. And that's how I met my wife. And then, we go to California, and I sort of say, hey, hon, I'd kind of like to be a policeman. And if I take this course at Santa Barbara City College, I can do this, and she had met me and married me when I was a, suit and tie, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday hospital administrator. And now I'm like, hon, I think I'd like to do this. And she said, well, go try it. See if you like it. And I'd work all day at my job or all week at my job. And then on Fridays, I'd come home, I'd put on my uniform, I'd go to roll call, and I'd work all night and come home at like 7 o'clock Saturday morning. And my wife would say, you would be exhausted, but you had this big grin on your face. Like, I love this, This was what I was supposed to do. And so, yeah, that was, one of those things. When our daughter was born, she was born in Santa Barbara, and then we moved back to the Midwest to Cincinnati. And I was like, honey, I'd like to do this full time. And she supported me in doing it. And I got on with the Cincinnati Police Department.
And what was that whole process like? Because I'm sure times were a lot different. And would you find it more difficult then or now to get in?
I think you'd find it was much harder to get in back then. There were, I remember the police department rented out the convention center, and we had like 3,500 people that took the test, and they were looking for 2 classes of 50. So they were looking for 100 people out of that 3,500. And then, after that, there was a physical fitness test, and certain things, could you perform these physical tasks? And then there was a psychological. You had to meet with a psychologist one-on-one. You had to do group things. There was a home interview. They talked to your, they went all the way back and talked to your grade school teachers. And
wow.
It was a long process before they finally said, hey, would you like to go and be part of the police academy? And even that wasn't a guarantee that, you were going to get out at the end and be a policeman. So it was a long process. Now, they're begging people to be policemen. It's just not something, I always tell people, it's like, think about this. If this were your job today, you make less money than a plumber. Everybody you come in contact with doesn't want you there. And everybody else you come in contact with lies to you. If that was your job every single day, how long would you do that job? Probably not very long, but that's what a policeman does, a policeman or policewoman does every day. You're making less money than a plumber. When it's never good when the police show up, whether they're giving you a ticket or they're knocking on your door to tell you to call the hospital because grandmother died and nobody can get a hold of you. And then everybody lies to you because they're trying to put their story as the one you believe, so you'll take the other person to jail. So that's your life every day. You better make sure you want to do this, and you do it because you want to make a difference.
How good are you at reading people then after all your experience? How many years were you in the force? First off, how many years were you on the force?
10 years.
10 years. And after how long did you get good at reading people? Because I'm sure that comes with, you're saying that people want their story to be the one you believe. After a while, you can sift out the BS.
You can, and you get training for that. There are interview and interrogation classes that you can go to, and they'll teach you about things. For example, if you're interviewing a sex offender for something, and you say to them, you're not sure you have the right person or not, and you say to them, hey, what do you think should happen to somebody who rapes a child? Well, most normal people will be like, well, you should cut off their genitals, and you should throw them in the deepest recesses. They get all emotional, but if it's the person who did the crime, they'll be like, oh, well, I think the person should probably get some help and stuff, and so there are certain answers that you're looking for that how a normal person will react, and a person who did the crime, they're going to react entirely different. So there are things like that. And then there's just visual cues. If you're talking to somebody and they're kind of like, looking around, like, well, hey, that person may be looking to run, and stuff like that. Or if you're talking to them and they're balling up their fists, maybe they're going to want to fight you. I didn't have too many people, I was 6'8", 240 pounds. You probably weren't going to beat me in a fight.
Mm-hmm.
half the time you were drunk anyway, or you were in bad shape and that kind of stuff. So it was a lot easier, but you could see that. And it's like, okay, now I can mitigate that. For whatever reason you were there, you could sit them down, you could put them in your car, you could handcuff them, whatever. But those were visual clues that, a lot of times, and especially younger people today, don't pick up on. And I've had young people say, hey, I'm interested in law enforcement. What would you suggest I do? And I always tell them, take these devices and put them down and go out on the street and talk to the homeless guy. And then go up to the penthouse and talk to that guy. Because being a cop, being a good cop, is about talking to people. It's about, because we got a lot of information. We had prostitutes when I was running a beat, in a marked car and uniform and that before I went to the drug unit. We had prostitutes and people were like, how come you never arrest the prostitutes? And we never told them why. It's like, because the prostitutes give us information. They'll tell us about, I remember one day we're driving down the street, we get waved down by this prostitute. And she's like, there are 3 guys in that vacant house right there. And they're pulling out the mantles of these houses and they're selling them to antique stores because they're real old. These are like, 1900 or, 1910 mantles. They're very ornate and worth a lot of money. Mm-hmm. It was like, oh, thanks. And we go in and we arrest these guys. And it turns out they were responsible for about 30 other crimes that were happening around the city regarding stealing mantles out of vacant houses. So it's like, yeah, we love the prostitutes. They gave us all kinds of information.
So at this work, sex work. And then is it really a crime? Because then there's other stuff, like other criminals that are like doing, like what they were just doing, Right. So I feel like there's a tier to it. So and that makes 100% sense. I guess it's very curious because I was born in 91. I grew up. Most of the kids in my school, I remember wanted to be a police officer and fireman and everything. I'm not trying to get too crazy or political or anything, but I feel like that's not the case anymore. And it's not just like ever since it went from like, I want to be a police officer to now slowly as I grow up in my 20s, it's like, we hate the police. We hate the police. Why? Because we're drinking and driving, blah, 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 that, but you're doing something stupid. And then especially with more recent events, we hate the police because there's a lot of bad apples out there. How hard is it to keep your name clean? And how is it hard to, when you tell people I'm in law enforcement, not to give you such a dirty look, especially when there is that corruption out there? Like, how do you feel? And again, not to get super political, but it's just hard because not many kids are wanting to be police officers, I've noticed, especially like after most recent events.
Yeah, I mean, the police are unfortunately the most visible part of government. You see them, they're in the car, they wear the uniform, they have a gun and all that kind of stuff. So they're naturally people very rarely remember this, but back in 2001, we all remember September 11th. Well, earlier that year, one of my classmates chased a black, my classmate was white, this person was black. He had 13 warrants out for his arrest, chased him down an alley. The black kid put his hand in his waistband. My classmate pulled his gun out, shot him once in the chest and killed him. And Cincinnati went crazy. They were burning stuff down. They were looting stores. Nobody remembers that about Cincinnati because then 9/11 happened and it kind of went away. But all the stuff that you're seeing in Ferguson and Baltimore and things like that, we were dealing with that stuff back, in early 2000s, and it was just one of those things where it's not hard to do the right thing. It's a job that really it's about integrity and it's about trust. And, there were times where we wanted to arrest people, but we just didn't have the probable cause to do it. And so they got away that day. And so as long as you don't cross the line, here's the law, here's what and you're going to make mistakes. You're asking me to make a life and death decision, at 3:00 in the morning when it's 10 degrees out and I've had 4 hours of sleep. And so there has to be a little bit of leeway, and that's called immunity, for the officer. As long as you tried to do the right thing, even if you didn't, it turns out that the young man that my classmate shot didn't have a gun. but he didn't have a gun. He didn't need to. It's the totality of the circumstances. We knew he had warrants. He ran from us. He wouldn't stop. He didn't show his hands. He put his hand in his waistband. That's the totality of the circumstances. Now, tomorrow morning, everybody will be like, well, he didn't have a gun. It's not that simple. And I always used to look at people and say, if you're not willing to put on this uniform, if you're not willing to go out there at 2:00 in the morning and chase that person down the alley, then I don't want to hear what you have to say, because one, you weren't there. And two, you're asking me to do a thankless job. You're asking me, and I always used to say, it's like putting your finger in the dike. Here's a leak. Okay, I put my finger in the dike. I stop that leak. Well, now there's a leak over here. Now I got to put a finger in there. Eventually, you're going to run out of fingers. You do the best you can. As long as you're honest and are willing to do what's right. I was a cop for 10 years. I never went to internal. I was never. My partner and I ran an entirely Black neighborhood. We led our relief in almost every category. Parking tickets written. Movers written. Felony arrests. Guns recovered. Dope recovered. Wanted subjects recovered. In almost every category, we led our relief. And yet we were never complained on. And I think part of that is we were older. I was a 37-year-old rookie policeman. So I had some life experience and I could talk to people. And I think people understand when, you pull a car over at 2:00 in the morning and you go up to it and you're like, sir, can you give me your license? And then why did you stop me? Well, sir, your car matched the description of somebody who just committed a robbery. Well, they get that. Oh, okay. I understand that. You're not the people. Thank you for your cooperation. You have a nice day. Please go on about your business. But it's the cops that are like, shut up. I don't have to tell you why I pulled you over. You're right. You don't have to tell them, but why wouldn't you? These are not the people we're looking for, but we are looking for people driving a similar car. You're not them. Thanks for your cooperation. So, part of it is talking to people and being able to talk to people and explain why you're doing what you're doing. There are times when you can do that. If you're in the middle of a gunfight or, you're drawn down on somebody, you're not going to explain what's going on. And people are yelling at you and there's, photographing you and all that stuff. Okay, that's fine. I'm still doing my job. When it calms down, I'll tell you why we did what we did. And why this guy is in handcuffs and why he's going to jail and stuff like that. You may not like it, but that's the reason why it is. And at least you have an explanation. And if you don't like the laws, we always used to say, as police, our authority and responsibility comes from you, the citizen. So if you don't like this, if you don't like the fact that we're arresting people for marijuana, then change the law. When you change the law, we no longer arrest people for marijuana then.
And that's a tall order to have, especially when marijuana was such a big, thing, and people are still locked up for that, and it's ridiculous that with just marijuana alone is ridiculous, and with everything that's happening. But then at the same time, I guess I like to when I talk to people, I like to see both sides of the conversation.
Sure,
you're right, because I was a troublemaker back in the day, but I wasn't too bad where I was murdering people, but I had my fair share of arrests. But at the same time, I am also very self-aware. So whenever I do get in trouble, I was like, you know what? I do deserve to be here right now. Not everyone is very self-aware like I am. So I can see that. But then at the same time, you don't see from the perspective of, you're right. It is 3 a.m. You're running on not a lot of sleep. It's cold out there. You basically leave your house not knowing you're going to come back. And how hard is that for your family? Because at the end of the day, you do have a family and you do have a wife and kid. And it's like, we all have something to go to. But at the end of the day, your profession involves you possibly not going home.
I'll tell you a quick story that I guess will kind of answer that question. So my badge number was 374. So when I started out, I was P374. I was a patrolman. And then I became a specialist. So it was PS 374. And then I was promoted to sergeant and it was S 374. Well, I worked with a guy whose badge number was 347. And I tell you that just because, we're a lot more alike than we are different. So this man's name was Kevin Crayon. And Kevin worked in District 2 with me. And when my normal partner wasn't he took the night off or something like that, Kevin would ride with me and we would do our thing. So I got to know Kevin pretty well. Well, after I went to the drug unit, Kevin got transferred to District 5. Well, one night Kevin's coming out of a convenience store and he's got a cup of coffee and he looks at a car that's parked there and the driver looks like he's 10. And so Kevin goes around the side of the car and the kid is panicking and Kevin's like, turn the car off. And the kid doesn't. And so Kevin commits a cardinal sin. You never reach into a vehicle. And Kevin reached into the vehicle and tried to turn the car off. Well, the kid panicked and put the car in reverse and started off down the street. And Kevin's hanging on the outside of the car. Well, Kevin ends up pulling his service weapon and shooting the kid twice in the chest. The kid slams on the brake, going like 50 miles an hour. Kevin flies off, hits his head on the oil pan of a parked car and crushes his skull and is killed. The kid drives home. He's 13 years old. He drives home and he dies in his mother's arms. That's tragedy all the way around.
Nobody won that one.
Yeah. I mean, and here's this guy that I, used to drive in the car with, that I used to, do my job with. And now I'm standing in front of his casket, as we're getting ready to bury him. So there were plenty. I attended way too many police funerals. It's always a tragedy, but it's always a tragedy anytime anybody dies. And the thing we had to remember as policemen, if I pull you over for whatever, you don't have a license plate light, on your car, or you have a tail light out or a headlight out, and I pull you over, for me, it may be the third traffic stop of the night. For you, it may be the most scary thing that's happened to you all year. And that's something we had to remember as cops. This is our job. We do it all the time. So it's not a big deal to us. To you, it's the scariest thing that's happened to you all year. So how we conduct ourselves and what we say and how we say it make a big difference in making that as pleasant as we can for you, or make it just a total nightmare. I hate the cops. They pulled me over for no reason at all. Well, I never knew anybody who pulled people over for no reason at all. They may not have told you why they did it, and that was their error, but they pulled you over for a reason. They just didn't stop you for the heck of it.
And I guess that's kind of like that. It's scary for both parties, because, like, for me, for example, I don't, I'm straight now, everything, nothing. I don't do any, just boring, typical average 30-year-old now. But like with everything that's happened and a lot of, cases of police brutality and things in the media, social media, big thing. You're saying that a bunch of stuff, all these things were happening prior. I don't think because there was a lot of independent outlets to, deliver that type of news. Like, you had like CNN, and NBC and things like that telling you what you needed to hear. Fox News, what you needed to hear. And now we have a lot of independent reporters, I use that in air quotes, independent reporters, being able to just get online and say what they need to say, and a lot of recording, and then a lot of just documenting things, a lot of documentation in the last 10 years from everyone. Doesn't that put you in a little bit like a state of ease for the business, and as far as like at the end of the day, there's a business, kind of thing you are getting paid for? Does that put you like there's no hope there, especially when police officers are forced to wear body cams now, and there is those bad apples that do the police brutality type things? And
sure, and there is, and those people usually don't stay on the job because you don't want to be working with those people. If there's something that's going on, you want to get that person out, because they're going to do something that probably isn't going to get them killed, but it's going to get you killed and stuff like that. But I think the thing you've got to remember, and I had this driven home one night when I was working as a sergeant, and there was a homicide, and I'm on the scene, and things are going on, and the media's there and stuff like that. And I get off my shift. I worked nights almost my entire career. I get off my shift at 7:00 in the morning, and I go home, and my wife has the news on. And I'm listening to the report that the reporter is telling, and I get this weird look on my face, and my wife's like, what's the problem? I said, I was there. What he's saying never happened. It totally never happened
Wow.
whatsoever. So I'm real cognizant now of things that I hear, in the media, whether it's print media or whether it's, CNN or Fox or, ABC or whoever it is. I'm real cognizant to not, oh, well, that's, he said it. That's the way it was. No, maybe not. I was there on the scene and this guy was there on the scene and he's reporting something like that didn't happen. That it's just flat out. That's just a lie. That did not happen. Didn't even come close to happening. It was like this. It wasn't like that. But, it's the old, if it bleeds, it leads. So the more sensational, the more gory, the more ugly you can make it, the more people are going to be, oh, yeah, let's hear about this. Well, no, you should want the truth. You should want the truth from the media and you should want the truth from your police department. And if you're not getting that, then that's a problem because, the media keeps us honest. And, body cams, I'm not going to say they keep us honest, but you know what? If you're not doing anything wrong, there's nothing wrong with having a body cam on. And we did not have body cams when I was there. We had cameras in our cars, though, and we had microphones on our belts. So you may not be able to see it, but you could hear everything that was going on a traffic stop, or if you're dispatched, for a domestic violence run, you can hear things and stuff like that. Plus, all the radio transmissions are recorded, so you can always get a copy of that under the Freedom of Information Act and stuff like that. So be very careful that, well, Fox said this or CNN said that as that being the absolute truth, because 9 times out of 10, as I always say, the truth most of the time is somewhere in the middle.
Yeah, and it's tough because being like I said, with all that information, your side of the story, and then like other, then there's the gory truth, and then there's the actual truth. But there is still, at the end of the day, truth to it, which, like even for me, like within recent years, like I went and got my concealed weapons license because you never know. I wanted safety, and then like knowing that I can just leave and one of these days someone might mistake me for someone who looks like, I've been mistaken many a times for somebody who looks like somebody else, and not being able to come home. So like realizing that in my mid-20s, like, oh my God, like this is a real thing and someone might mistake me for somebody else.
Right.
And I might not come home, so I have to take my proper precautions, because whether it's a bad guy taking me out or supposedly one of the good guys taking me out, someone was going to try to take me out. And that just kind of puts a lot of people at ease, especially myself. It is really hard out there to like, I guess for people to want to hear both sides of the stories when they know like I'm a man of color and I might die today because of that.
You might, and I'm a police officer, and I may die just because I wear a gun and a badge.
Exactly.
It's not right for you. It's not right for me. And we've got to do a better job. I mean, especially when you think about there are more guns in the United States than there are adults. And the guns don't bother me. I mean, somebody, who has been through the vetting process to get a concealed carry like you, somebody who's taken the training and hopefully continues to do ongoing training, because, firearms is an appreciable skill. If you don't practice, you'll get worse at it. The more you practice, the better you get at it. Those people don't bother me, and everybody's like, oh, we got to take guns away or we got to do this. And it's like, I got news for you. The criminals could care less what the laws are. I mean, look at Chicago. They have the strictest gun laws in the United States, and people are getting, 18, 19, 20 people getting killed every weekend, and they're getting killed in the neighborhood where my mom and dad grew up. My grandfather was a Chicago police officer from 1924 to 1954. So he was in Chicago during Prohibition, when alcohol was outlawed in the United States. This was long before you were born. Yeah. But, when alcohol was outlawed, during the Great Depression in the 1930s, and during the gangs, when Al Capone and all these guys are shooting up the town. And he was actually shot in the line of duty with his own gun. Was not a serious injury, was shot in the ankle, taking a murder suspect back to the lockup and stuff like that. So the old days, the new days, we're better at policing than we were back in the 1920s, just plain and simple. I mean, we have better tools, tasers were a great addition, less officers got hurt, less suspects got hurt because you could tase somebody instead of having to go, hand to hand with them and stuff like that. People got hurt when you did that. So there's all kinds of things that are evolving. And I can promise you, nobody I ever worked with got up in the morning and was like, well, I think I'm going to go to work today and kill a black guy. That never happened. It is as horrible as it is to obviously be shot or killed by the police. It's also horrible on the person that does it. Their life is turned upside down. Their family is bullied. They've got to live with the fact for the rest of their lives that they took the life of another human being. And everybody I worked with, that would have been a horrible thing. It would have been a horrible thing for me to have to do it. And I came very close a couple of times to actually doing it.
Any regrets from your time?
No, not at all. I think I made a positive difference. I wish I could still be doing it. I would, probably, be a lieutenant or a captain or an assistant chief by now and stuff like that. And teaching the younger people how to do the job. The attitude now with cops is, you know what? You don't want us? Screw it. Fine. Go out there and let the crime happen. We'll show up. We'll take a report, turn it over to an investigator and the heck with that. That's not the answer. The hands-off thing, it's not the answer. We've got to work together. You as a black man, me as a police officer, every Hispanic people, Asian people, we've got to work together. If we do that, we can make a difference. If we just keep yelling and screaming at each other, nothing's going to get done.
I agree 100% with you. I think that's a very poignant thing that you just mentioned, that we all have to work together and do our own part. And yeah, it's really hard, especially when that already stigma has been set in the last 5 years, I don't trust police officers kind of thing. And it's really hard. I guess there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I don't see it getting, we're not any closer, I think. But you said you were going to go up the ranks. Can you tell me why it happened, why you're not in the ranks now?
So, I told you about how I became a police officer, and, I told you, you make less money than a plumber.
Right.
My wife has been the primary breadwinner in our family, since we've been married, and, we've been married almost 30 years now. And when we were in Cincinnati, she lost her job and could not find another one in Cincinnati, and did find one in Texas. And so I had to leave the police department. I always, family has always been an important part for me. I was never one of those policemen that when the shift was over, hey, let's go out and have a drink at the bar. No, I don't want to do that. I'm going to go home to my family. That's what helps me decompress. Those are the people that I love, and those are the people I want to be around. So for me, it was, doing that. My wife supported me in an entirely, shift in my career. So when it came time for me to support her when she had to find another job, that's why I ended up leaving the police department.
Do you miss it at all?
Yes.
Yeah. What part do you miss the most about it? Like,
I miss the making a difference. I miss, taking a drunk off the road that isn't going to, kill your sister or your mother or, or your kid or something like that. I miss, picking up a 13-year-old kid at 3:00 in the morning, in October on a Wednesday night, and taking them home to their parents and working with the parents about, hey, he should be in school. Why isn't he in school? And there were those instances. And then there were also the instances where you pick the kid up at, 13 years old at 3:00 in the morning on a Wednesday during school, and you take him home, and dad is in prison and mom's a crackhead, and he's being raised by his 80-year-old grandmother who goes to bed at 8:00 at night. Well, that kid doesn't stand a chance because he doesn't have any positive role models in his life. His grandmother's doing the best she can, but let's face it. Who's there to tell that kid, hey, no, stay in school, get an education. You can do something with your life. He doesn't understand that at 13. He needs a role model or role models to, a family to tell him this is what's acceptable or not. And he's not getting that. And that was the sad part of the job, that you knew, you walked out of that house after having to cite 80-year-old grandmother to court. Grandma, sorry, this is the law. I've got to cite you. You got to go to court and answer for why, your grandson was out at, 3:00 in the morning on a school night. What's grandma going to say? I'm doing the best I can. Yes, ma'am, I know you are. I know you're doing the best you can. Unfortunately for this kid, it's probably not enough.
And you being a human being and having feelings as well, because everyone listening, he's a human, he has feelings. How do you not vomit or like give yourself ulcers from doing things like that? At the end of the day, it's a just not respected job, and now you have to do all these very not that respected things within the community, like the grandma situation, to now people hate you now. But again, you're just doing your job. you know doesn't that put an ample amount of stress on you and your well-being?
I mean, certainly absolutely, it's a stressful job. I'd be lying to you if I told you it wasn't. It is. There are times when you get scared. People used to ask me, do you ever get scared as a policeman? Yeah. Any cop that tells you, they don't get scared is either an idiot or they're lying to you. Fear keeps you alive. I remember when I worked in the drug unit, I worked with a guy who went on a simple noise complaint. The neighbors were complaining that, these people's television was too loud. He goes and he knocks on the door and he tells them, hey, turn the television down. And they're like, oh, okay. And they turn the television down and he walks away. We arrested a guy that was in that apartment that night. 5 years later, we arrest this guy. And here's what this guy tells him. He said, yeah, I remember you. You came and knocked on the door. We were cooking up a batch of crack at that time. If you would have walked into that apartment, there was a guy behind the door with an AK-47 that would have shot you in the head.
Wow.
And it's like, and you have no idea. You didn't know. And you're there, making less money than a plumber, trying to make a difference in your community, just trying to keep things from, totally going, to a chaos kind of deal. And part of it, again, it goes back to having role models. If like I said, I worked an entirely African-American beat for a number of years, and the number of kids that had no dads, had a single mom. The people we worked for was the single mom with 3 kids who was working 2 jobs and just trying to make ends meet. That's the person I wanted to help. That's the person I wanted to make a difference for. I don't care what color your skin is. At 3:00 in the morning, I have no idea whether you're black or brown or Asian or white. I have no idea what you are. I'm just doing my job, and I'm doing it to the best of my ability. And, when you're getting wanted people off the street, when you're getting dope off the street, when you're getting guns off the street, you think you're making a difference, but you wonder if you really are.
Does it ever put you make you very cynical at all, or very callous to everything and just, no hope in anything? Because that whole, no,
not for me. To some people I worked with, yeah, it did. It's like, screw it. There's no way we're ever going to get past this. Well, if that's the attitude you have, then you probably shouldn't be doing this job.
Right.
You want to make a difference. You want to think that there's hope out there, that by you doing this, you can make a difference. I will never forget this run. And, it's so much like, like everything else, things happen right at the end of your shift. We're getting ready to go in, and we're quitting at 7 a.m. We're getting ready to go in and tag our property and have our report signed by the boss. And we get a run at 6:30. And it's like, are you kidding me? Can't you hold this for the day shift, and stuff like that, 6:30. And they couldn't, because it was a domestic violence run. Mm-hmm. And what ended up happening was, it was a mom and stepdad, and they were good people. And, we could tell just by looking at them. And so they go to bed, and the kids are already in bed. Mom gets up in the middle of the night, checks on the kids. The oldest is gone. He's 14 years old. He's gone. He's snuck out. And so she comes, and she goes back to bed. And in the morning, he's back. He's back in his bed, and he gets up. Well, she knew he had snuck out because she'd gotten up. She takes a cloth slipper and spanks him on his butt. Mm-hmm. It didn't hurt him. It didn't, it's just like, hey, this is not acceptable. Your father, now he's not my father. He's my stepfather. This was a kid with a lot of rage and a lot of emotion. So the kid calls 911, says, my parents are beating me. Well, that's why they couldn't hold the run. So we get there, and, we're talking, and, as soon as we pull up, the kid comes running out of the house, and he's yelling and screaming and stuff like that. And so my partner kind of takes him aside, And I take the parents aside, tell me what happened. The mom told me the story. And the kids, she beat me and stuff like that. My partner's like, she didn't beat you. She hit you with a slipper. That's what a good parent does. That's parenting. So he goes walking off. No problem. Let him go walk off and cool off for a while. Let him calm down. So we're giving the mom and dad literature, information about how they can get some help with him and stuff like that. Here he comes back and he's moving real fast and stuff like that. He goes into the house and we're in the front yard. I mean, we're just standing in like anybody's front yard. There's nothing around, no cover, no concealment, no anything. He comes out on the front porch with an AK-47 in his hands.
Wow. Okay.
And he's standing right on the steps, 3 steps to walk down from the front porch. And his little brother's sitting on the porch right in front of him. And I may get emotional because I still to this day, because he was a good kid, still is a good kid. I hope he's an adult now. So, my partner and I yell gun, we draw down on him. There's nowhere for us to go. I mean, we can't hide. We can't get behind the car. There's nowhere. And if he points that at us and shoots us, he'll kill us because our vests will not stop an AK-47 around. And we're screaming at him to put the gun down. And I mean, literally, I was on the trigger. I mean, I was getting ready to shoot him because it was like, I'm not taking a chance of him killing us. And he dropped the gun. And it was like, oh,
wow, that's high pressure moment.
You think?
It went from like 0 to 100 real fast. Why?
Exactly. Like I'm saying, it's like, oh God, we didn't want to take this run anyway. We just want to go in and go home and quit. We're tired. And this is what you get. And I mean, I would have been totally justified in shooting him. He had a gun. He would not drop it. I would have had every right. It was a gun that would have penetrated, the bullet would have penetrated my vest, my partner's vest, his mom and dad. But I knew that if I started shooting, I'd probably kill his brother as well. And thank God he dropped the gun. And I remember going to court on him, and he was a good kid. He was a good student. He was on the football team. It was just like, I even gave him my business card. I'm like, look, if you ever get into this situation again, call me. Don't do something stupid like this. Call me and we'll talk it out. I don't want you to get killed. Here's a 14-year-old black kid that never would have made it to adulthood because some white cop shot him. If you were in my shoes, would you have shot him? There were a lot of cops that I know that we should have shot him. Like,
and they would have, because once they see the AK, that's it. That's all you really need, because
that's exactly
coming at you aggressively, right?
Right. Yeah, you didn't drop it when I'm telling you to drop it. I'm pointing a gun at you, telling you to drop the gun, and you don't drop it. I would have been totally justified in shooting you. Would the rest of my life have been ruined? Very well may have.
Yeah.
How
Isn't
horrible
that scary
would that
for your
have been?
family though? Like for moments like this, did your wife hate it?
You tell. I told my wife a lot. I didn't tell her everything.
Yeah.
And there's just certain things that you just kind of calm down. I mean, I was shot at a couple times, almost hit. I didn't get hit, but a drug dealer shot at me when we were buying dope from literally across the street. Think about stand on one curb, have somebody else stand on the other. That's how close he was, and he missed. I mean.
That's terrifying. That is a terrifying line of work. And that's pretty bold of you that like you have a good sense of communication skills enough to like talk first, shoot later. I think we need more of that, if anything. And it's so simple as just talking and like hearing each other out.
Right.
It's so simple. I feel like it's not much, but it's a little bit goes a long way. I feel like maybe that's the start of something for change, if anything.
I think it goes back to, it's listening to understand as opposed to listening to respond. Mm-hmm. It's like, Lewis, hurry up, say what you're going to say because I'm going to get my 2 cents in, as opposed to, wait a minute, Lewis, where are you coming from that? Help me understand this. That's what we need. That's the kind of communication we need. Not, hey, I gotta talk. I mean, you can obviously tell I can talk pretty well, but I'm also very good at listening. And that's one thing as a negotiator, we had to be very good with being comfortable with silence. If you and I are talking and there's silence, there's that natural tendency to want to fill that silence with something, words or something. We would just let the silence happen, because usually the bad guy or the barricaded person or the person who took the hostage, they would fill the silence. We had to shut up and, I'd like to say something here, but nope, keep my mouth shut.
Yeah.
You do that.
So, I do love silence, though. I love making people nervous with my silence. It's just
it does. It's a great sales technique. Really if you just don't say anything, just let the customer keep talking, then you learn stuff. Yeah,
exactly. So then now you stopped, you gave up the force. What happens next in your journey?
So our family moves to Texas, and I start a school security consulting business based on all my training. I've got an undergraduate degree. I've got a master's degree. I've been to law school. I did not finish law school. I want to make that totally clear. I've been to law school. I did not finish it. So I've got all this education. I've got all this training and SWAT and things like that. So I started a school security consulting business, and I worked with schools around the United States to improve their physical security. I wrote their policies and procedures. I trained their staffs and things like that. And I also coached basketball. My daughter got my height. She's 6'2". She went to the Air Force Academy to play basketball. So I wanted to coach her. So that happens. And that's also right around the time that I ended up getting this very rare form of cancer.
I want to go into that next, because that's a special little that's going to trigger a little bit, because cancer is such a shitty thing. I hate it so much. Can I just give you a little quick, because it's just
sure.
I have a friend who just passed away this last Sunday from cancer. Sorry. And I if anything, y'all, I'm going to dedicate this episode to her. Angelica Gloria, you're one of my best friends. I love you so much, and it sucks because there's things I wanted to tell her and I couldn't tell her, But a good friend of mine, I've known her for the last 10 years. A strong battle, very strong battle. Principal of the Catholic school here in Salem. Really got her master's degree, just all around, just did everything by the books, went to school, became a principal. And then this thing happens, and then slowly took her out, and it upsets me. It makes me angry. If anything, that's the feeling I get, is anger out of that. And again, I really hate it. I hate it with a passion. And I wish that that's one thing I can find as a cure for it. I wish I could. But obviously, I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime or anything, but it's just a lot of processing, a lot of everything, especially when we didn't even have the funeral. And I know a lot of people are, upset at this too. She was a big figure in the community. I'm so hurt still, you know what I mean? And this is just the first time that I was able to talk about it. But I guess for everyone else out there who kind of knows what I'm going through and what you're going through, can you just tell me your journey from finding out and your whole process with this disease?
Sure. So first of all, I'm sorry that it sucks to lose somebody that's close to you to this disease, to watch them waste away and feel helpless that you can't do anything. So I guess I would recommend take some time to grieve. It's okay. It's okay to cry. It's okay to feel down. It's okay, to feel depressed, but realize that in my mind, and I have a tremendous faith, she's in a better place as far as I'm concerned. I don't know if you believe that. And if you don't, that's okay.
Oh, I do 100%.
Okay. So my journey started in 2012, and I was a high school basketball coach, and I had a callus that broke open on the bottom of my foot right below my third toe. And initially I didn't think much of it, because being a coach, you're on your feet a lot. And after it didn't heal for a couple of weeks, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an x-ray and he's like, "Terry, I think you got a little cyst in there and I can cut it out." And he did. And he showed it to me. It was just a little gelatin sac with some white fat in it. And he said, "Doesn't look like it's anything, but I'll send it off to pathology and have it looked at anyway," which I'm glad he did. 2 weeks later, I get a call from him. And as I mentioned, he was a friend of mine. And the more difficulty he was having telling me what was going on, the more frightened I was becoming. Until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, "Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have a rare form of melanoma, which most people think of as a sun disease. You're exposed to the sun too much and you get melanoma that way. But there's a rare form of melanoma that appears on the palms of your hands or the bottom of your feet. And they're just, for an education wise, there's a rarer form of melanoma than that appears in your mucous membrane. So in your mouth or your nose or something like that." He said, I recommend, because it's so rare, that you go to MD Anderson in Houston and be treated. MD Anderson is probably one of the best cancer hospitals, certainly in the United States, if not the world. And so I did. And I went there and I had the bottom of my foot kind of cut out. And I had all the lymph nodes in my groin removed just as a precaution. And when I healed, my oncologist put me on a drug called interferon. Now, interferon for me was not a cure. It was just, we're going to try to kick the can down the road and buy you as much time. And I took a weekly injection of this drug, interferon, for almost 5 years. And the side effects of interferon were I had flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. And that was not to cure me. That was just to try to keep the disease from coming back. In 2017, I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees because of the toxicity of the drug. 108 degrees is usually not compatible with being alive, but somehow I survived that. But I had to stop the interferon. The disease immediately came back in the exact same place that it had been, on the bottom of my foot. 2018, I had my left foot amputated. 2019, the disease came back, kind of worked its way up my leg into my shin. I had 2 surgeries there. And then last year, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in my ankle area grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse in the middle of the pandemic was to have my left leg amputated. And I also found out I had tumors in my lungs. And I'm ongoing therapy now. I'm on a clinical trial for the tumors in my lungs. So that's kind of my 9-year battle with cancer.
How are you holding up now, today? As of right now, where are we at?
I'm dying. I started on chemotherapy. I'm on this clinical trial drug. It has shrunk the tumors in my lungs by about 30%, but it's not going to cure me. It's not going to stop the growth. Eventually, they're going to start growing again. And so, I don't worry about the dying part of it. When I found out I had the leg to be amputated, and that I went to the mortuary, I went to the cemetery, I went to the church, and I planned my funeral. And it's funny because I got some brushback from people. People were like, don't you think that's kind of defeatist? And I kind of looked at them like, well, last time I checked, everybody's going to die. Nobody's working on a cure for life right now. So, everybody dies, but not everybody really lives. If you go out and you live your life, you find your purpose or your passion or your why, and you live that, death is not nearly as scary. And that's what I found. So, people are like, do you blame God because you got cancer? I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker, cancer today. I don't think that happened at all. And I know I kind of poke fun at this and I make humor out of it. I think I can. I think I've earned that right to do it. But and this is going to sound really weird, and I don't know if your friend felt the same way, but cancer has made me a better person. I'm a better person because I have this disease, because I've been battling this disease for 9 years. I don't know if my family would feel the same way. I'm sure they would like me to get
elaborate a little bit, because you already seem like a good person as is. How much more better can you get, especially with something that's so scary as cancer?
I think I can get a lot better. I look at it like we're all going to experience pain in our lives. Pain is inevitable. And it doesn't have to be cancer pain or a chronic illness or anything like that. You could flunk a test at school or break up with your boyfriend or your girlfriend or not get the promotion at work that you think you deserve. Pain is inevitable. Suffering, on the other hand, suffering's optional. Suffering's what you do with that pain. Do you use that pain to make you a stronger and more determined individual? Or do you wallow in it and want people to feel sorry for you and feel sorry for yourself? Because I'm telling you right now, it's a choice, and it's your choice, and it's only your choice as to how you want to attack this. Do you want to be, oh, woe is me, and you should feel sorry for me? That's not the way I want to live my life. I want to go down, the decisions that are made are, I want my life to be based on the decisions I made, not on the decisions that somebody else made or the decisions I didn't make. So I get a lot of information. I read a lot. I ask my doctor a million questions. I'm sure he's ready to hit me over the head with a 2x4. So, like, shut up. I got the MD degree. You just do what I tell you. But that's not me. I want to be involved in my healthcare, and I want to make the decisions that I think are right. And I remember when I had the tumors in my lungs, and my doctor's like, well, I want to start you on chemotherapy. And I was 8 years into this. And I was like, is it going to save my life? And he's like, no, probably not, but it's going to buy you some more time. And I'm like, I don't think I want to do that. But I'll go home and I'll talk to my family because there's other people to be considered here. And so I go home and it's just me and my wife and daughter, and I'm telling them what the doctor said. And my daughter's immediately, all right, family meeting. I'm like, family meeting? There's 3 of us. What do you mean family meeting?
Yeah.
So we all sit around the kitchen table and I tell my side and they tell their side. And then my daughter's like, all right, let's take a vote. How many people want dad to have chemotherapy? And my wife and my daughter raised their hand. I'm like, wait a minute, am I getting outvoted here, to take chemotherapy? But I remembered back to the police academy where our defensive tactics instructor used to make us bring a photograph of the people we love the most to class. And he would have us look at that photograph as we were learning different techniques to defend ourselves, because he reasoned you will fight harder for the people you love than you will fight for yourself. So guess who took chemotherapy? Because I love my family more than I love myself.
That's bold. Now, you're a very bold dude. You know that?
Hey, you know what? Sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
Yeah. So I guess it's kind of like, I like that side of the spectrum. You're right. You can be wallow and everything, and your family could be like very depressed the whole time, but it looks like you guys are just like taking it as it comes, and trying to be positive about it. It's so hard to be positive, but I think you find the positivity in such a negative thing. And it goes refers back to my friend. Like, she bought an electric scooter, was scooting around, bought an RV, was traveling around, and doing what she loved. And at the end of the day, that's all I can really be happy for, is she did what she wanted to do and she went out on her terms. And I like that. I'm probably, because that's just how I am. You're right, I haven't grieved yet. I haven't fully took the time and to grieve. This is my grieving, actually, is talking it out. But yeah, I guess going out on your own terms, and people, we're all going to die. We're all living through this, and we're all just, it's the universe's cruel joke. The unknown. When you said you were planning out your funeral, I feel like you're on the right track. I kind of was thinking the same thing. Like, it should be your last party on earth. It should be your last big hurrah. And definitely when I'm starting to like feel, I'm sure people feel like, she told me, like, you feel you're going to die. Like, this, like, more than normal people. You feel it. Whatever it is, there's something in you that you feel your mortality hit you. I figure once I, get close to that feeling, I would want to set up my own party. Like, I don't want people to be sad for me. I want people to be excited for me. I feel like I'm a fun guy. I don't feel like I want to be depressed all the time. I think I guess it's hard to speak for everybody else, but for me, I want to have a party. I want everyone to celebrate. I want people to celebrate me, not grieve me and be depressed. Are you kind of on that same spectrum where you want people to celebrate you?
Yeah, there's a Native American Blackfoot proverb that I heard years ago that I love, and I'll share it with you. It goes like this: when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life. And that's the important part of this quote. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. I want to live my life to the point where, I died. Yeah, good. You know what? Let's see what's on the other side of this life. Because for me, believing in God, having faith, I think there's something on the other side of it. And one of the things that I learned from being, involved in team sports from, the time I started at 9 years old playing basketball till I finished college, was the understanding that you're part of something that's bigger than you. If you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your parents down, your fans down, and all that stuff. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. So when I'm going through all this crap, when I go for my treatments for my clinical trial and stuff like that, and I'm throwing up and I'm shaking and I have a headache and I feel like crap, I remember that this is bigger than me. It may not save my life, but you know what? the doctors may learn information from all the blood tests that I go, all the scans that I have, that'll save somebody's life 5 years from now or 10 years from now. And if that's the case, then my life will have even more meaning.
Wow. That's very, again, you're just a bold person. I like admire how bold you are, especially like facing death in the face like that. It's one of those things that kind of scares me. Is in previous episodes I've talked about mortality and what that means to me. A lot of my 20s were lived very recklessly and very alone in this sense, but now it's kind of like that. I have other values, like family is a huge value for me now. Wanting a family is a huge thing for me now. Leaving a mark kind of thing, almost like maybe that's the narcissistic in me, but like I want to leave a mark. I want to leave a legacy, some form of legacy, whether that's children to keep on, my legacy. I always thought that was very important. What do you have anything that you wish you in that sense where you want to leave behind that people to remember you by, or like this is Terry?
I don't. I've been asked, how do you want to be remembered? And I'm like, I don't really have any great desire to be remembered. I mean, nobody's going to name a street after me or a basketball court or, a building or anything like that. That's never going to happen. I mean, I don't think I'm any more important than, any of the other billions of people that, live on the face of this earth. So I don't have any great desire to be remembered. I mean, in all honesty, think about it. I mean, I've got one child, a daughter. I mean, when she dies, is anybody going to even remember I was here? I don't think so. So I don't spend a lot of time worrying about being remembered. I spend the time thinking about how I can make an impact today on you, whoever I come in contact with, whoever I touch, because I have the opportunity to talk to a lot of people. I've probably done well over 200 podcasts from, people all over the world. And I always say it's good people like you who allow me to come on as a guest. And between our conversation, hopefully we're going to make a difference in the life of at least one person that listens to this. And if that's the case, then today's been a good day, and that's the way I try to approach things. I don't try to, be any more than I really am. I mean, I'm a nobody, but it's, nobodies can be somebodies to everybody. So I figure, what, you allowed me to come on tonight. Let's have a conversation and make a difference in somebody's life.
I love that. That's amazing. And that's all I really want to do is just spread a conversation. And that's at the end of the day, that's all we really have. That's one of the things that makes us different from the deceased or people who aren't even born yet. Conversation. That's one of the hugest skills we lose when we die is conversation. And so one of the things that I like to hold near and dear is my conversation. So really quick, while we're winding down, I know that we've only touched the surface. I know you have an extensive life, and I'm very thankful that you told me thus far. This is a very interesting journey thus far, but I'm very curious. Before we wrap up, I have one question for you. And what's good in your life right now? With everything that's happened, what can you say, this is good in my life?
Everything. I know that sounds cliche, but it is. I appreciate everything that's going on. I mean, it's cold today. It was 70 degrees yesterday. It's cold today. I like it being cold. I love my family. I've had so many good things happen in my life. I've had a lot of crappy things happen in my life, but I learned from those crappy things. And I guess I'll leave you with this one story. And I've always been a big fan of Westerns growing up. My mom and dad used to let me stay up and watch Gunsmoke and Wild Wild West and stuff like that. And you probably remember the Will Smith Wild Wild West, movie and stuff like that. I mean, I remember the original, and that. But so 1993, the movie Tombstone came out. You've probably seen it. It starred Val Kilmer as a guy by the name of John Doc Holliday, and Kurt Russell is a man by the name of Wyatt Earp. Now, Doc Holliday and Wyatt Earp were two living, breathing human beings who walked on the face of the earth. They're not made up characters just for the movie. Now, Doc was called Doc because he was a dentist by trade, but in all honesty, he was a card shark and a gunslinger. Mm-hmm. And Wyatt had been a lawman his entire life. He'd been a deputy U.S. Marshal, a town sheriff, and things like that. And here are these two men from entirely divergent backgrounds form this very close and caring friendship. And at the end of the movie, Doc is dying at a sanitarium in Glenwood Springs, Colorado, which is about 3 hours from my house. The real Doc Holliday excuse me, died at that cemetery, or that died at that sanitarium, and he's buried in the Glenwood Springs Cemetery. And Wyatt, at this point in his life, is destitute. He has no money, he has no job, he has no prospects for a job. So every day he comes to the hospital to play cards with Doc so the two men can pass the time. Mm-hmm. And in this scene, they're talking about what they want out of life. And Doc says, you know what, I was in love with my cousin when I was young, but she joined a convent over the affair. But she's all I ever wanted. And he looks at Wyatt and he says, what about you, Wyatt? What do you want? And Wyatt says, I just want to lead a normal life. And Doc looks at him and says, there's no normal, there's just life, and get on with living yours. Louis, you and I probably know people who are just sitting back and they're waiting. You know, when this happens, I'll have a normal life. When that happens, I'll have a successful life. When this happens, I'll have a significant life. What I'm going to say to your audience is don't wait. Don't wait for life to come to you. Get out there, find the reason you were put on the face of this earth, and live that. Because if you do, I promise you two things. One, you'll be a whole lot happier at the end of your life, and you'll have a whole lot more peace in your heart.
Amazing. Amazing. I feel like this is what I needed to hear today. I think I'm feeling selfish for my listeners because I'm the one that's taking most of it in. And this is great. That's very poignant and amazing. Wow. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. You guys are listening to 98.3 KMWV. You guys heard all that, right? Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast, check it out. Again, Terry Tucker, thank you so much for taking your time. I loved all the stories you just told me, and I'm so grateful for people like you. I am very grateful for people like you to just kind of, there's still good people out there, and regardless of all the BS that you've been thrown, like you still find the positivity, and that's something I'm lacking, and I need to find myself.
It's there. I always tell people everything you need to be successful in life is already inside you. You just need to find it, pull it out, and use it for your benefit.
Thank you so much. I'm shook. I'm going to take this. I'm going to take all this and run. You okay with that?
I'm totally okay with that.
Thank you guys for listening Down the Rabbit Hole podcast. Thank you again, Terry Tucker. I'll keep you up to date on everything and, sending you positive energy, my man. This is great.
Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
Have a good night.
You too.